Tonight on BNC Live, a nation once again on high alert on the heels of the insurrection. The warning from law enforcement ahead of new threats.
USCP is working with all of our law enforcement partners in the DC Capital region to make sure that all of the intelligence we have and threats to the campus, we are prepared to respond appropriately. We do have some concerning intelligence.
And a boost in production. The president's push to produce enough vaccines for every adult in the nation by the end of May. This as some states have lifted their mask mandates. But will that be a costly and deadly move?
We got extreme levels of cooperation from private sector partners and everybody to say, let's follow the president's pledge, move forward and try to make sure we can get everybody vaccinated as quickly as possible. We are not in a habit of overpromising, and therefore, even as of several weeks ago, before such time as the approval of Johnson & Johnson, the president was talking about moving up the date till the end of July.
Plus, how one black-owned bank is helping to create black wealth. The quest to put the black community ahead. Good evening and thank you for joining us this hour of BNC Live. I'm Brittany Jones. To our top story tonight, new details have been revealed in day 2 of testimony in the Senate hearings on the Capitol riot. The head of the D.C. National Guard says days before the Capitol riot, the Trump administration leaders restricted his ability to deploy troops in response to protests. Let's take a listen.
So the memo was unusual in that it required me to seek authorization from the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of Defense to essentially even protect my guardsmen. So no civil disturbance equipment could be authorized unless it came from the Secretary of Defense. Now, the Secretary of the Army, to his credit, did tell me that I could have force protection equipment with the guardsmen. So we did have helmets, shin guards, vest. We did have that with us, but that came from the Secretary of the Army. The Secretary of Defense told me I needed his permission to escalate to have that kind of protection.
And Democratic strategist Richard McDaniel is with me now. Richard, welcome back to BNC. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
So, Richard, we all remember when our hearts sank on January 6th as we watched the insurrection play out live on TV. We had extensive breaking news coverage. So it's hard for people to think, again, that some folks are plotting something like this all over again. Do you think the January riot possibly emboldened more far-right groups?
Absolutely. We heard today in the testimony, the FBI director said that, this anti-domestic terrorism or white supremacy is growing rampantly across the country. And on tomorrow, they have possible threats that could siege the Capitol again. And for folks who don't know, we, of course, inaugurated President Biden on January 20th, but in the past, before they ratified the 20th Amendment, March 4th was actually the original inauguration date. And so, we have new reports that there's a possible threat on D.C. coming up tomorrow. And so this is something alarming, and today we're now learning sort of the backstory about what went down on that sad day.
Mm-hmm. And so, Richard, think about some of the concerns that the Democrats have testified, and so did the FBI director, as we just mentioned, calling them domestic terrorists. What are some challenges we could really be facing as a nation going forward if these conspiracy theorist groups believe Trump will somehow return to power?
Well, it's an assault on the nation. It's an assault on the Constitution, which is, ultimately treason, right? And if you talk about the oath that you take as president to serve and protect enemies, foreign and domestic, and now, the previous administration is on the second impeachment for possibly inciting riots, but an assault on the very well-being of the Constitution and being this country, what it was founded upon, is alarming. Right now, you have 33 states and there's state legislators who are fighting, anti-voting bills and voter suppression bills and trying to make it more difficult for folks to vote, all based on lies. And so we talk about what could possibly happen at the Capitol, but who knows how this could stem down to, on the state level, as state legislators begin to kind of, put their tests forward to kind of block people from voting. So we're going to watch it, and we're going to look at, we're going to look at some of the facts and realize how we can get better to protect this country.
And what do you think Dems are going to have to do in order to combat that?
Well, one, they're going to have to get down to the nitty gritty nuts and bolts and really focus on the root issues. One, they're on the rally their troops to ensure that, we want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to be cautious. Violence is not the answer. We need to communicate. We need to have conversation, and we need to understand that what the issue that's railing them is the false narrative that is being spread. And how do you defeat a false narrative? Well, you defeat it by continuing to get involved in the elections. We have municipal elections coming up. We have local elections coming up over the next 2 years. And that is how we seize and take control over ensuring that stuff like this doesn't happen, by putting in policies and legislation in place that is for the betterment of all and not just for a certain demographic.
And so, Richard, do you think, since the insurrection happened and the fact that there's been so much criticism of the Capitol Police, that they're trying to be way more proactive this time around? And does it make a difference with who's the leader in the White House now? Because we know, like you heard before when we played that soundbite from the National Guard, saying that they didn't have the same approval and authorization as he had previously. Correct.
I think, as the story continues to unfold, right now, there's a lot of finger pointing going on. But as more people testify, as we get more of the facts, right, one, it strengthens our police force. We talk about defunding the police, but I think we need to look at that a little bit more carefully in terms of how we manage the money and the resources that goes to our police officers. They're here to serve and protect, so we need to ensure that's the job they're doing. But secondly, we want to understand who is actually on our side and fighting for us in the correct and right way. I think one of the things that they pointed out in this committee today, that in the previous protest in D.C. This past summer for protesting against, police violence, police brutality, social justice, there wasn't a halt. There actually was a push to get troops and more support out there. But now it's very peculiar that there was a delayed response in terms of sending support the D.C. police officers and the Capitol police officers.
Do you think they'll switch gears now, how they handle those situations in comparison to all of the black protesters before?
One would hope, right? I think that now everybody's being put on what we call Front Street. And so with the new administration in, with new leadership in, I think we're at a point where President Biden has implemented a structure and put his foot forward and said, we're going to govern this country in the best way, the strongest way, but also a respectful way. And I think things like this won't be tolerated, but we want to ensure that, one, our elected officials, our citizens are safe, and people have a right to protest. We understand it is your right as an American to protest when you don't agree with something, but we ask that you do it safely. People say you've never heard of a safe protest. Well, I'm pretty sure right now, after the riots on January 6th, we're going to handle things a little bit differently.
And going into Thursday, what would you think is happening right now in terms of getting prepared for since the fact that they are on notice at this point?
Well, right now, I know the House is meeting. They're trying to get as much done as they can before tomorrow comes. It's sort of a reliving sort of that terror again. It's something that, we don't want to happen. The Capitol right now is a fortress. You would have to be, even a cockroach would need a security clearance to get through those halls right now. And so I think, the streets will be prepared. I know the DC mayor is working diligently with, DC local police as well as Capitol Police and the National Guard, where everybody's communicating. And that's what we need to ensure the safety of our people, and ensure that those who want to protest whatever they feel like they need to protest have a right to do so safely and peacefully, and that we all can return home and sleep and wake up the next day.
I love how you said even a cockroach would need a security clearance. Well, appreciate your time, Democratic strategist Richard McDaniel. We will see what happens tomorrow. Prayerfully, we will all be safe. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you.
Well, next on BNC Live, the potential risks of states dropping their mask mandates and abandoning guidelines. Stay with us. We'll be right back in about 2 minutes. Welcome back. A bold push. President Joe Biden says the United States expects to receive enough coronavirus vaccines for all adults by the end of May. That's 2 months before his original date.
We got extreme levels of cooperation from private sector partners and everybody to say, let's follow the president's pledge, move forward and try to make sure we can get everybody vaccinated as quickly possible. We are not in a habit of overpromising, and therefore, even as of several weeks ago, before such time as the approval of Johnson & Johnson, the president was talking about moving up the date till the end of July.
President Biden is also pushing states to get teachers vaccinated by the end of March to accelerate school reopenings. Drug maker Merck will help manufacture the new Johnson & Johnson coronavirus vaccine. Well, despite a plea from health officials, Texas and Mississippi will lift their mask mandates. Both governors joining a growing movement of elected officials across the United States to loosen COVID-19 restrictions.
Every individual is empowered to do the right thing here, regardless of what the states decide for personal health, for public health, for their health of their loved ones and communities. I would still encourage individuals to wear a mask, to socially distance, and to do the right thing to protect their own health.
Texas and Mississippi will also end limits on the number of diners who can be served indoors. The governors of Michigan and Louisiana also eased up on bars, restaurants, and other businesses, including the mayor of San Francisco. Well, joining us now to discuss this is Judge Carlos Moore from Mississippi. Thanks for joining us and welcome to BNC, Judge Moore.
Thanks for having me.
So, Judge, Texas and Mississippi is doing away with the mask mandate. Could this be a costly and a deadly mistake? What do you think?
Yes, it could be very deadly. I believe the governor of Mississippi is being very reckless, and I encourage my fellow citizens of Mississippi to take their lives into their own hands and continue to wear their mask. Use common sense. It's too early to do away with masks and to be congregating in large or small facilities in great numbers.
So what's your biggest concerns about that?
I do believe we're on the tail end of the pandemic and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm afraid of a surge by doing it too early. President Biden has indicated that there will be enough vaccines available for all Americans at the end of May. This is the beginning of March. If I was in control, if I was governor of Mississippi, I would wait another 2 to 3 months at the minimum before I release the mask mandate. And so I think Governor Tate Reeves is being very reckless. This is a Neanderthal move, as President Biden said.
And Judge Moore, since you brought up the vaccines, talk a little bit more about that. How is access in your state?
Access, if you want a vaccine in Mississippi, you can get one. I received my second Moderna vaccination on last Wednesday, and so they are plentiful here. I'm encouraging minorities, Black and brown people in Mississippi to go ahead and get the vaccination. I had no reactions. I'm fine, and I know a lot of the Caucasians in Mississippi are getting the vaccine, and so the governor, even though we're 40% minority state, he's encouraging people to take off the mask, but minorities need to get vaccinated in larger numbers because our health and our lives are at risk if we don't get it.
And, you know, Judge, when you look at the CDC saying just less than a month ago that we needed to double mask, and now for states not to demand one at all, what message does that send to folks?
It sends the wrong message. I don't want anyone that could have survived COVID to be killed unnecessarily listening to Tate Reeves. Use common sense. If Tate tells me to go jump off a bridge, I'm not jumping off a bridge. I have common sense for myself. Double mask up at least. Do something to save yourself and your families. Don't listen to Tate. He is misguided at this point.
And so have you all been in contact with the governor just to express your concerns about how you feel about the decisions that's been made at this point?
I have gone to social media. I know he and a lot of people see my social media, so I've gone to social media to tell people my firm is still requiring people to mask up before they come in. I'm still wearing a mask, and I'm just trying to lead by example as president-elect of the National Bar Association. So I'm leading by example and encouraging all my colleagues, friends, and fellow citizens of Mississippi to do the same.
And what's it been like in terms of when you speak to some of the businesses and stuff like that? Are they feeling concerned about the fact that this will be lifted and maybe potentially going to take the opportunity to make sure that folks can't come in their businesses without wearing a mask?
I believe certain progressive cities, the leaders and the businesses and that are progressive, the owners, they are going to continue to require the mask regardless of what the governor says. And so I encourage that the more mayors, county supervisors, business owners, you are in control of your premises and your cities and your counties, and so you can still mandate the mask. And so I encourage everyone to do so at this time.
So, Judge, you talk about 42,000 Texans, because we're talking about the two states that we know for sure who have lifted this ban, or mandate rather, have already died from the virus, and nearly 7,000 people in Mississippi. While they've both seen decreases in deaths and cases, could this be setting the pace for other states to follow?
They could be setting the wrong example. I mean, if we survive it, this is a very risky test. I wouldn't do it so early. It's just not wise or prudent at this point. I mean, what's another 2 months of mask? I mean, it's not going to kill us, but COVID could. And so I'm just very afraid. But I think most of the people that I've spoken with in person on social media, we're taking it very seriously. We're going to continue to wear our mask. And so I'm not detrimentally afraid. I think some people are going to take the mask off, but I think the majority of us have good common sense in Mississippi. We might have been born at night, but we were not born last night.
And still not telling folks to gather up either, right?
Correct. I believe Tate is a rebel rouser, but we are looking towards a new Mississippi, and we're going to use the gray matter between our ears.
All right, Judge Moore, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, New York's Governor Cuomo isn't the only public figure in the spotlight for allegations of sexual misconduct. We'll unveil a new report of former White House top doc Ronnie Jackson. That's next. A new Pentagon watchdog report issues a scathing review of Texas Representative Ronnie Jackson during his time serving as White House physician. BNC's White House correspondent Ariana Maniz joins us live now with the details. Good evening, Ariana.
Good evening, Brittany. Representative Ronnie Jackson of Texas, he has come under fire following from Washington. I'm Ariana Maniz for BNC.
All right, Ariana Maniz reporting for us. Thank you. We're following some breaking news right now into our newsroom. The House has canceled plans for a Thursday session due to the warning from security officials about a possible plot by an unnamed militant group. That's according to the Washington Post. This comes after credible threats of violence circulated by right-wing extremists that March 4th is the true inauguration day when former President Donald Trump will be sworn in for a second term. Now, March 4th was the original date for inauguration years ago in 1861. But despite the threat, the Senate plans to be in session Thursday. Well, next, the House prepares to pass a bill to put a stop to voter suppression. A breakdown of what's in the bill and how it could impact you. When we return, BNC Live continues after just 3 minutes. Democrats are celebrating the For People Act. It's a sweeping set of electoral reforms that would increase voting and election security. The act also aims to stop the flow of special interest money from unknown sources to campaigns.
Everything is at stake. We must win this race, this fight for this bill, because at the same time as we are gathering here to honor our democracy across the country, over 200 bills are being put together, provisions are putting forth to suppress the vote.
Now, if the legislation does make it through the Senate and Biden signs it, the redistricting reforms wouldn't kick in until the 2030 census. BNC's chief legal correspondent, Dr. Laura McNeil, breaks down what this new law could mean and what other threats to voting access are still out there. Let's take a listen.
We are going to go to our chief legal analyst, Dr. Laura McNeil, to talk about this historic day, what it all means. Dr. Laura, what exactly did we just see there?
What we saw was history in the making. I think the quote that really resonated with me, Tashani, was keep your eyes on the prize, and the prize being to end voter suppression, especially in communities of color. And so what's so significant about the HR1 bill, or as they say, the For the People bill, is it addresses
the White House is warning of a potential military response to a deadly rocket attack in western Iraq. A U.S. contractor died when at least 10 rockets slammed into the airbase housing U.S. and other coalition troops. No one claimed responsibility for the attack. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby says the U.S. contractor suffered a cardiac episode while sheltering from the attack and died. This was the first attack since the U.S. struck Iranian militia near Iraq and Syria last week. Well, the attack raises concerns that the U.S. could be drawn into another period of escalating attacks, potentially complicating the Biden administration's desire to open talks with Iran. BNC's chief foreign affairs correspondent Nayyera Huck has more.
Well, if we look at it almost a year ago to this date, there was a similar attack by Iranian-backed militia on exactly the same Air Force base. So this is part of a pattern of the United States trying to deal with Iranian aggression in the region. It's also part of the sober reality that we are a nation at war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, President Biden also released a national security strategy in which he said the U.S. should not and will not be engaged in forever wars that have cost thousands of lives and trillions of dollars. So then the question remains, how is the United States going to thread a needle between its footprint in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and the reality of needing to bring troops home?
So this was the first military strike by the Biden administration. So what message is this administration sending to Americans and others abroad?
The United States has maintained under a Biden administration the idea of America is back, and that's twofold. It's back in the sense of diplomacy and a willingness to engage multiple actors, including adversaries like Russia and China, along diplomatic tracks. And secondly, taking a relatively hard line, as mentioned last week in Pentagon statements, that the United States will give proportionate response to defend its civilians and its interests abroad. Now, that's all going to come to a head knowing that the Iran nuclear agreement is going to be under discussion. The United States has been working through European allies who are still part of the agreement to see if there is a way forward to diplomatically make sure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon.
Well, coming up, the head coach of one of the top 15 men's basketball teams in the country is facing criticism for comments he made to his players using the word plantation. Reaction is next in sports. New this hour, reparations have been a hot button topic for decades. The issue is making its way back in the national spotlight. A Chicago suburb could be handing out money to Black Americans this spring. Our Eric Cox explains.
Just north.
And that was part of BNC correspondent Eric Cox's report. Our thanks to Eric. Well, there could be more severe weather on the way for parts of the country. Let's get a quick check on your weather forecast with meteorologist Brittany Lockley.
Well, they have sunshine for tomorrow, staying in the 70s to end out the week. And of course, more thunderstorms are going to be headed your way by the weekend. But for more weather information, you can always start your day bright and early with Chief Meteorologist Kevin Smith.
Our thanks to Brittany. That's going to do it for this hour of BNC Live, but make sure you stick around. We're back in about 3 minutes.